welcome to the Serenity Health and Wellbeing podcast with me, Sarah Cassels, where we explore simple, sustainable ways to take care of your mind, your body, and sense of self through all the seasons of life. If you're listening to this in January, you may have stepped on the scales this morning, and if you did, I want you to pause for a moment, because that number tells you very little about your health, your worth, or the year ahead. In today's podcast, I want to gently invite you to consider making 2026 the year you stop letting the scales dictate how you feel about yourself. Not because weight doesn't matter at all, but because in midlife it's often the least helpful thing to focus on. So let's take a look at this in a bit more depth. So firstly, why does this topic matter so much in midlife? If you're listening to this and you're in your 40s, 50s or beyond, you may already feel that something has shifted. Maybe things that once worked no longer do so. You might also find that your body feels unfamiliar. Your energy may fluctuate more and your sleep may become lighter or more disturbed. In my own experience, my weight behaved in ways that I thought really was at times very unfair and confusing. And yet the messaging doesn't seem to be changing. We're still encouraged to eat less, move more, energy in versus energy out, push yourself harder, and then all that results in is blaming ourselves when we fall off the wagon. So as a retired nurse and as a woman in my midlife, I want to say this clearly. Your body is amazing. It is responding to hormonal, neurological and metabolic change, and the scales are a very blunt, outdated tool for understanding all of this. Secondly, let's talk about why the scales become unhelpful in midlife. As women, when we move through perimenopause and menopause, our bodies change hormonally, metabolically, and emotionally. When you weigh yourself, the scales don't reflect muscle gain or hormonal shifts. They also don't reflect on any improvement to your blood glucose levels or your cholesterol levels, your strength, your quality of sleep, or your confidence. And above all, they don't show how resilient your body actually is. Instead, from my own personal experience, scales create frustration and can sadly encourage restriction rather than nourishment. They also have a tendency to undermine consistency and keep us on that sort of on-off cycle of health habits. I was an overweight teenager, and for around 30 years afterwards, my weight and everything that came with it felt like a constant nemesis. I'm a gold member of Weight Watchers, Slimming World and Rosemary Conley. So I've really been round the block. But I genuinely believe these groups can be very supportive. They help people learn healthier habits, lose weight and feel part of something. But what I've noticed over time was this pattern of when you're not on plan, it's really easy to overindulge, and often all the hard work that you've taken to lose weight creeps back on. And then before you know it, you're stuck in this perpetual cycle of losing, regaining and feeling guilty. I will say though, I still attend a weekly Weight Watchers meeting even now. Not for the programme itself, but for the camaraderie. I love having a space to talk about health and well-being with like-minded people, and I get a lot from that. I do think that Weight Watchers in particular don't just focus on the scales and food, although of course tracking and counting points are part of their programme. But they also consider sleep, stress and overall well-being. It's a much more holistic approach and I really do salute them for that. Also, when I first came to Sheffield, those meetings were a wonderful way to meet people and feel connected. So please don't think for a moment that I'm criticising slimming groups, because I'm really not. But when I turned 50, I became tired of it all and I made a quiet decision that I wasn't going to let the scales rule my life anymore. As I began researching this in more depth, I found a way of living that allowed me to keep my weight steady without constantly counting calories, sins and points, or over-exercising to make up for what I'd eaten. Now, of course, there have been hormonal changes to my body, plus the addition of HRT, but I've learnt to adapt to these changes rather than fight them. Scales and wanting to be a particular dress size steal the enjoyment of food and a trust in your body. They also have a tendency to strip away your confidence in social situations and take away your peace of mind. So pause and ask yourself, how many times have you let a number decide whether you're having a good or a bad day when you stepped on the scales that morning? It's not about health, but an unnecessary pressure that you do not need going into your midlife years and beyond. So, what can we focus on if we're going to remove the scales from centre stage? Well, here are some ideas that I have learnt over the last few years, and I have found them to be far more meaningful markers of health in midlife, such as how strong I feel when I'm climbing hills or stairs, how well I sleep, how stable my energy is across the whole day and how my digestion feels, how often I want to move because that's the thing I want to do, how resilient I'm feeling emotionally, how comfortable I feel in my clothes, and above all, how confident I feel in my own skin. These are signs of a body that's been supported, not punished. This raises the issue then about how we can reframe weight loss without obsession, because I think the biggest fear that many people feel is that if they ditch the scales and stop weighing themselves, they will lose control. This is a very real fear, and I want to acknowledge it because many women in particular worry that without the scales they will overeat, they will let themselves go, and they will lose structure. I want to reassure you that in reality, the opposite often happens. I first came across somebody called Dr. Andrew Jenkinson in the autumn of 2020 when he brought out a book called Why We Eat Too Much. And this book was a major contributing factor in my own decision to reshift my focus away from numbers on the scales and being a particular dress size. He explains that we have two hormones called ghrelin and leptin. Ghrelin from the stomach signals hunger, telling the brain to eat, while leptin from our fat cells signals fullness, telling the brain to stop eating and maintain energy stores. He explains something called weight set point, which he describes as the body's natural weight it tries to maintain. But this is influenced by our genetics, our environment, and that sort of on-off dieting, which raising it by triggering that sort of famine response in the brain. He emphasises that dieting itself can be counterproductive, leading to a higher set point weight. He brought out a second book in 2024, which was equally insightful and very readable, called How to Eat and Still Lose Weight, which builds on from his first book. He discusses his weight set point in more greater detail with the science backed alongside it, as well as time-restricted eating. Now, I generally do eat within an 8-hour window, although not always. And I have found time-restricted eating is quite good for me, but it's not for everyone, so we're not going to delve into that today. Instead, I now eat 2 good meals a day, which has shifted the focus onto nourishment and away from restriction. I start my morning with an electrolyte drink and a large mug of peppermint tea. After a couple of hours, generally after exercise, I will then have my collagen fat coffee, which is filling and delicious, and you can find the recipe on my website. Over the last 5 to 7 years, I have tried to reduce my sugar and refined carbohydrate intake, although not always successfully, and it is still a work in progress. But I now focus on prioritising protein and healthy fats with both my meals, as well as increasing my fibre intake. I also prioritise sleep and try and manage my stress levels in a more positive way. Because if we can manage our stress levels better, it will lower insulin and improves leptin signalling, allowing the brain to recognise fullness. Now, I exercise every day as I'm out walking the dogs with my husband. However, with a busy life, whilst I try to get to the gym 2 to 3 times a week to do strength training, I don't always succeed. So I have a set of dumbbells by the kettle, and whilst I'm waiting for the kettle to boil, I might do some bicep curls or a few squats. This is much easier to fit into my day, and it is consistent. I will leave you a link below as to where you can purchase Dr. Andrew Jenkinson's books. You might also want to research his weight set point in more detail and see if this is something that might help you this year. So here's a gentle experiment for you to try this month. I would like to encourage you to put the scales away for January. Don't tell yourself I'm never weighing myself again. This is not forever. It's just for 1 month. And during that time, I want you to notice how your relationship with food positively changes, what your mood feels like, what is driving your motivation now you're away from the scales, and whether you can begin to trust your body more. You can always return to scales, and that's absolutely fine. The difference is that you will have the knowledge to know that what the scales may say may not really reflect on what's happening to your body, and you've made peace with that. In conclusion, I want you to remember how your body has carried you through so much to reach the point you are now in your midlife, and it will continue to do so in the future if you look after it. In 2026, maybe for the first time, your health doesn't look like needing to lose weight, but it looks like strength, steadiness, confidence and peace. You don't need to earn rest. You don't need to punish your body to deserve care, and you really don't need a number to tell you you're doing well. Thank you for listening, and if this episode has resonated with you, I invite you to keep exploring what living well means for you this year, quietly, kindly and without pressure. And if you'd like support navigating midlife health in a way that feels grounded, nourishing and sustainable, I'd love to support you. You can contact me via any of the links below. So until next time, take care of yourself because you matter much more than the scales.